So welcome. I know it's late. There's only two of us here, or three of us here. The good news for you, if there is good news, is that we have a very short presentation. The intent of this is for you guys to do it hands-on. And I thought that actually having a smaller class would be ideal. I didn't expect to be this small, but it still is ideal. And so we're gonna get a lot of hands-on. Do you guys work on any ultrasound at all? What's your experience level?
Limited. Used to service ultrasonics.
Okay.
So changing modules, hard drives,
Okay.
probes.
All right. Well,
doing the testing with the Phantom.
So you probably know a little bit about the Phantom anyway. But in my experience, I'm the director of service and training for AUS now. I worked for MXR and Conquest prior to that. I was a service director at Conquest. And one of the things that I noticed amongst my own service engineers was everybody used the Phantom differently, which means some might have used it correctly and others didn't. And it became evident that people are trained incorrectly. And I found this on site, on the web. It seems to me to be a simplistic, easy to understand document. And if you have an electronic device, I'll give it to you today. If you don't, that's fine. You got my cards. Email me, which gives me your email address, and then I can email you the presentation. I get back to my office tomorrow afternoon, evening. So the following Thursday or Friday, I can have you a copy of this little presentation. It's wrote in English. It's not wrote by a physicist, which I like tremendously, right? I know you can't read all the reading, but I'm going to go through it because these are tests that you should be doing. If you've worked on ultrasound even a very little, one of the worst things in the whole world to troubleshoot is an image quality problem, because the technologists always say something like, my image sucks. And you go, well, that's not very informative. So what do you mean? Well, it's mushy. Another really generic term that doesn't tell you much. And you go, well, what do you mean mushy? Well, it used to be grainy, but now it's mushy. We're not getting anywhere here, right? So the point of this whole class is to let you see what an image should look like. I have a disadvantage and advantage because one of the things about image quality is there's what they call tangible image quality problems, which are real. They're not hard to find. And this probe has one of those. I did that on purpose. It's subtle, which is another thing I like about it, because you can go, well, I don't think that's that bad, and yet it's there. So we want to talk about image quality a little bit. This is one of the tools you have, is a Phantom. If you don't have a Phantom right now, you plan on doing it, I really recommend. It used to be ATS. If you knew Linda, she retired. She was the person in charge of ATS, owned it, and then she sold it to CIRS. And CIRS now owns the right to this Phantom. It's an ATS Model 539. And you might ask why I like this one. I don't get any commission off of it, so if that helps you. It's made out of ballistic gel. It never evaporates. A lot of the really nice Phantoms out there, they're all, image quality is great, but they have a fluid inside of them. And annually, you have to send them in and get them weighed. And then they either recharge them with more fluid or they pass it and say it's good for the next year. This one never requires calibration. So you buy the Phantom, which isn't cheap. This one today at CIRS is $3,105. You can buy it from us. We've already got them on order. If you're interested, it doesn't matter to me if you go to CIRS or not. Again, I don't get a commission, but I'll charge you. You'll pay the same price. And we have them on order. This is a 5-month lead time now. So that's the advantage. We're not well ahead of you yet, but the plan is for us we bought 10 of them. And when we get them in stock, as we sell 5, we're going to order 5 more. So we're kind of always ahead. If they go really fast, we might order another 10 based on the demand. But the advantage to you guys will be that you get them hopefully the next day, right? Instead of 5 months before you need them. So that's why this one, no calibration. The cost is all pretty close, but because it's got the ballistic gel, it requires no calibration. It's good. Got a warranty for 10 years. It's pretty good. So we have some tests we're going to talk about, and then that's really the end of the lecture. And there's like 8 of them. They're not hard. And I just want you to kind of understand them. They call this dead zone or ring down. And there's a dead zone. You can barely see them. I know the lighting's not good. The presentation is hard to see. When you have it on paper or on your monitor, you'll see it a lot better. But there's a set of dots there, and you're free to look closely, bring the phantom back there. We'll image with it here, but you can see the dots at the top of the phantom. And you want to know what dead zone you have to begin with, because it affects, if there's degradation on the system over time, you want to know that that's happening. So if your dead zone goes from, you can see this dot, and then the next time you test it, you can only see this one. Well, clearly something's changed on your ultrasound, so you want to measure that dead zone and have just a measurement in your records, so over time you can see if the dead zone's changing. Now it'll be different per probe. So you want to do this test on every probe. The higher the frequency, the closer the dead zone should be to the top. So you should have a smaller dead zone, right? The higher the frequency. And it tells you the testing procedure. Scan the phantom until the dead zone target group is clearly displayed. That's that target group at an angle. So it clearly, it's in English. There's no physicist language. First target is positioned 1 or 2 millimeters below the scan surface. So you just want to make a measurement from the top of the image to the first one you can see. It's a caliper measurement. It's not hard to allow you to do it. Use the electronic calipers and document the measurement. So super simple. Okay, that's test 1, and then it goes on further. And I have a clicker, but then it just clicks to the next page as opposed to letting me scroll down. So hopefully this lets me scroll down if I can get the mouse here. And then the results, it tells you the system's dead zone should remain consistent from week to week. So really all these phantom tests have the same kind of description at the end. They're looking for degradation over time. You either have degradation or you don't. They should remain consistent week to week, month to month. And when you find something that has significantly changed, or maybe not so significantly, but you can start to see a pattern where it's degrading over time, then there's something coming up, and you could be aggressive, you could be proactive in solving it. So that's the first test, dead zone test, pretty simple, and it has to be done for every probe. I keep wanting to use this as a computer, I apologize. So the next test, I went just a little too far. Let's see what they're talking about. Okay, they're talking about depth measurements now. So unfortunately, because of this screen, I can't get it to scroll up very easy. Yes, that's what I can try to minimize the display. There you go. You can still see that. I know it's not easy to read, but I'll read what you have to do. It does make it easier for me now. So there you go. They talk about vertical measurement, calibration, geometric accuracy. And there's 2 types of geometric accuracy they're specifically talking about right now. One is what they call axial, and those are the dots that go from top to bottom. Your axial measurements are any 2 objects that are very close together going from top to bottom. They call it perpendicular to the beam path, but top to bottom is more descriptive to me. When they're very close together, what happens is they tend to blur together if you don't have good axial resolution. So you're looking for, are the 2 objects that are close together blurring together, or can you see them independently? And that's what you're looking for, axial. And you can see they're talking the objects top to bottom. Okay, the next one that they're talking, it's another slide, but same principle. Now they're side by side. That's called lateral resolution. Lateral, I always remember the difference between axial and lateral, because lateral, left to right. So that helps me figure out which one it is. If you don't do it all the time, you go, which one's which? Well, that's how I distinguish left to right. And then you need to do the same measurement. Are they blurring together or not? Can you distinguish if they're two separate objects? This little curved array here is called the resolution array because that's an opportunity for you to use the phantom and see if you have both axial and lateral resolution. Okay, it'll be a curved array, and it's not just the ATS that does that, it's in phantom. Okay, they'll give you an opportunity to see axial and lateral. So clearly, if the object's going in this dimension, blur together, that's lateral. If they're in this dimension, it's axial. Okay, and one thing we know about ultrasound, or should know, is if they're blurring together, does that mean there's a problem with the system or probe? And the answer is not necessarily, because the frequency of the probe determines what its resolution should be anyway. So if you have a 1 megahertz probe, which in ultrasound is very low frequency probe, you expect poor resolution, but you get high penetration. If you have a high frequency probe in the 18 megahertz range, for example, you get low penetration but high resolution. So you always have to know the frequency of the probe affects your resolution. Again, low frequency, high penetration, poor resolution. High frequency, low penetration, high resolution. So that affects all image quality. So that's kind of what we're looking for, axial and lateral. You take a picture of the lateral array or the resolution array, and you make a determination if you think it's good or bad or proper. Is probably even a better term, proper. Proper meaning 1 megahertz, maybe they blur together a little bit, and that's kind of expected, okay? So that's axial and lateral. And I'm going to skip a little bit, but it tells you the testing procedures at the bottom, and they're exactly the same for axial and lateral, except the dots you're looking at. And I just explained the difference. The dots are top to bottom or left to right. Testing with procedure is using the calipers. You measure and see if you can tell the difference, how far the difference is. It's pretty simple, top to bottom, left to right. It's the same procedure for axial and lateral. And then it tells you your results right there, what you should expect. And then you go on with geometric, but now we're talking left to right. And you can see the arrows indicate left to right. So that's the same test that we're talking about. Don't let it bother you. We're just trying to figure out, and any ideas on what you would expect better resolution on in the axial manner or the lateral manner?
You get more penetration. Be on the lateral, axial.
Axial would be your better as far as resolution goes. It's going in the same direction as the path of the sound wave. Lateral, on the other hand, you get a little scatter. So when you see the images, they're supposed to be specific dots, but you'll see they're normally wider in this axis than they are taller in this axis. So your axial will be better than your lateral in a traditional sense. Okay? So same thing, we're not talking any rocket science here. We're just conducting the test, and it tells you again what you should expect. And it's straightforward, no physics involved. Oh, dang it, just a little too much. One bump too many. Lateral again. These are the resolution arrays. Now they're defining what you're looking at. They try to start off defining what axial is versus axial versus lateral. And now they're telling you how to do the specific test and what array to use. Okay, so we're not going far. We're not doing anything different now. Just using the resolution array further now. I really like this little procedure, if you will. I've read a lot of them, and I don't even know what they're saying. And I'm a physicist, and I'm like, what are you trying to say? Focal zone now. Are we familiar with the focal zone? Where you point in the image area. If you come up here, I can show it to you. You will be up here, but there's a pointer. It's as specific as that, and a technologist can point to where they specifically want to focus on the image. So we're looking here, and the whole test is about, as you adjust the focal zone, are you seeing improvement in the image? Where you expect to see the improvement? You can add multiple focal zones, so you can have multiple regions you're looking at if you have a larger area of concern. So this tells you how to do it again, but we'll show you how to adjust the focal zones. Some of them have bars. Some of them have arrows. This is a Phillips, which I would normally associate with a bar, but because it's a portable system, it has an arrow. So you just have to look at it and realize if it's a bar, you can adjust the size of it. And you can pinpoint it to one dot, one focal zone, or you can make it very wide so the whole screen is your focal point, if you will. The problem with making it really large is that it extends the refresh rate. So things that are moving, if you're looking at a moving object, it's going to get very chunky because you've made it such a large, the refresh rate goes way down. It's called frame rate. You'll see it FR, and it's measured in hertz, which is kind of misleading because you'll see 30 hertz. That's not the frequency of the probe. That's in the megahertz range. It's a frequency that the screen's being refreshed. So don't get caught on that. I ask a lot of my students coming through, what's the frequency of the probe? And they go 30 hertz. So they see FR and then you see hertz. It just kind of leads you down the frequency, which it is, but it's refresh rate. Tells you how to do the testing procedures for that. It's really easy. Again, we're just looking at are we improving where we're expected to improve. If we're not, then we have a problem. If there's a clear line, if you put your focal point, let's say right in the middle, and then there's a line going through here, a crisp line where it's different above and below, that's also a problem. So you don't want to see that. Okay, so we're looking for distortions that the focal point causes when it should be improving. So, any questions on that? Pretty straightforward. Again, these aren't hard tests, but what people misdo or how they do things, they're not done right. As an example, the objects that you're looking at right here, what do we know about these objects just based on the color, the white dots, if you will? What do we know about them? They're very dense.
Yeah.
They're echogenic, whatever you want to call them. Bone would be, in this case, they're actually nails going through the pen, if you will, pins, metal pins. So they're going to be very echogenic, right? So do we want to do a penetration test using the nails? And the answer is no. You're going to see those to the end of the earth, right? You're going to use what the approximation of what a cyst is. And those are the darker objects you can see there, but they're these objects, that they're black. So you have those objects, and we're going to do this in just a minute, that you measure for depth. You don't measure these. About half my engineers were using those for depth measurements, and they were coming up with extraordinary numbers, right? And I'm like, how are you doing that? And so we had a class, we flew them all in for just kind of team building and stuff. And one of the points of the thing was I had my senior engineer do a phantom testing, record it, where the next guy, the junior engineer, came in, did his measurements, and we compared them, and they were completely different. And so we solved it that day to show them how to correctly. So focal zones, important when you're looking at it. And here you go. I don't know why they call it sensitivity testing. It's penetration testing. Sensitivity seems like such a weird word. I guess they call it that because Is it sensitive enough to be able to detect that one small object? I don't know. But really what the whole goal is to use this testing procedure to see how deep the probe can go. So when we talk about that, again, a standard probe, you know how many frequency this probe has as a standard in the industry? 3. And they call it low, medium, or high. So you have a low frequency range, a medium, and a high. This is a 3 to 12 megahertz probe. So you probably go at 3, you go at 12, or low, and then you split the difference at 7.5, and there you go. So you have to test at all those. And you say, well, why do I have to test? We're looking for penetration. Why wouldn't we just use a penetration setting? Because when you're using a penetration setting, what do you lose? Resolution, exactly. And when you do that, you may not see that tiny object that you're looking for, even though you're set up to go deeper. You have to have a larger object to be able to see it. So you'll see it at a deeper one if it's a large object. But when we're looking at these phantoms, picture doesn't depict it there. Clearly, we have rows of 3 objects, and then 5 objects, and then 3 and 5 and 3 and 5. So you're always looking for the smallest object when you're doing penetration testing. When do you want to find a cyst? When it's small, right? So that's the intent of penetration testing. So you have to do it on all 3 frequencies, unfortunately. And you maximize the depth that you can see, and you record the deepest recording you get. Doesn't matter if it's in penetration or resolution. If it's the deepest one, you record that one. That's the max penetration for the probe. And it tells you to do that. It's as simple as that procedure. It's not difficult. You can see, it doesn't show all the objects, but you can see we're doing the same type of testing here. That's probably the 4th. I think there's a bigger one over. Okay. So, any questions on sensitivity or penetration? That's an object, a test you have to have for every time you do a PM. You should check that. Okay. And then you have functional resolution. We're going to talk about that. It's all here. It's a little less. It's more ambiguous. This is one that I do if I have the time, but I don't do it every PM because it is a little bit more ambiguous. You can take and do your caliper measurements and measure it, and I'm 0.09 centimeters off of what yours was. Does that really matter? You want to know your caliper measurements, that they're accurate. But when you're measuring these objects this big, just one little tiny bump of the trackball means you're way different than I am. So important. I'm not arguing it, especially if you're talking bigger objects, but it gets a little ambiguous. So Grayscale. Oh, sorry. This is the last one I think I'm really going to talk about, and then we're going to do this on a Phantom. If I can look at the thing when I'm looking at it, I can navigate when I'm sideways and upside down, and I'm not so good. Okay, this is called Grayscale. Most people call this contrast imaging. Grayscale is the same thing, doesn't matter. Grayscale is the different shades of black and white, right? And in between. You can see the objects we're referring to. They clearly turn the Phantom on its edge. The reason we do that is if you were scanning, I know this is only half a probe, but if you were scanning like this, you'd be going from top to bottom. And what do we know about this object? Very dense, right? It's like bone. What's going to happen underneath that? We're going to get a shadow. So we rotate the Phantom, and now we don't have to penetrate as far to get from the top all the way down. We can just do this. Even if we're only getting 2 or 3 objects, then we slide it 2 or 3 more objects until we get all 6 objects. And the simple explanation on this is you need to see them all. Can you see 6 different objects there? Okay, the 3 to the right, the white ones, if you will, the lighter gray, those are the most dense. The 3 on the left are the least dense, and they go accordingly. The very least dense is the furthest one to the left. And the test is, can you see all 6? These are very close. What do we know about this object here, this gel, if you will? What's important about it? It represents the average density of human tissue. The average density, which is 1540 meters per second. It's really not important. You know the average is somewhere there, and if what you're looking at is less dense or more dense than the average. Okay, so there's really 7 measurements there. This one, oftentimes, it's really difficult to see. You may not see it. May barely be there. And why is that? Because the system, not the probe, can't resolve the difference between the average and the density of that, which is only 3 decibels difference. This is positive 3 decibels, this is negative 3 decibels, and this is 0 decibels. So when the system itself can't resolve down to differentiate them, they can't see them, they won't be displayed. So that's really what you're looking at, okay? Make sense? Now, do you need to do this test on every probe? With every other test is required to do it on every probe you have. It's resolution, it's measurements, it's very detailed. So why would this one be different? Because frequency shouldn't affect what the density of the material is, right? If you're firing at 1 megahertz, it should see all 7 objects, 6 objects in the average. Well, if you're firing at 18, it should be able to see 6 objects. So you only need to test this on 1 probe. I normally make it a mid one, so I have no problem reaching it. If I'm at 18 megahertz, I'm going to have a hard time getting here. Okay, so I try to get something around the 10 megahertz, depending on what the customer has. So I'm clearly getting beyond, and then it doesn't matter if you can see them all. It's the system's ability to differentiate it, not the frequency. And so I only need to do this test on 1, and I will definitely have a printout. Because an image quality problem, a lot of times, is based on this. The images, its system loses its ability to see a specific density. Okay, make sense? That's really what I have. Like I said, I'll send it to you. It's all in English. I don't need to read it to you. If it was in physicist language, then there'd be problems, but it's not. So that's it, the end of the thing. I just showing you. Those are the tests that we do. We do them on every PM and any call I'm going to that says image quality in a title. If you do not establish a baseline the first time you work on the system, image quality issue is really difficult to track down because they can't define it, right? It's subjective. Ultrasound is very subjective.
Are those saved as a test file?
You can save them as a test file. You name the patient, for example, PM ACR, American College of Radiology. So now you know the customer, you did a PM, but you did it in conformance with an ACR, or just PM. And then you can save it to their server, and then you can recall it 6 months later to compare your results. Or you can do it at printouts. And then just make sure if you're using a thermal printer, you keep them in a spot that's not super hot. You can put them underneath the cosmetics, but not inside the computer because it gets much hotter inside than outside. So it is a thermal printer as such. So keep that in mind. Do it. But have printouts or be able to recall printouts. Take them on your phone. If you don't have access to the PAC system, they don't have a PAC system. They don't have a printer, kind of like we're here right now. Take them on your phone, but don't only take them on your phone. Make sure what pictures on your phone looks like the picture on your screen, because it doesn't do you any good if somehow it looks better on your phone than it does on the screen or the opposite way, right? So try to as accurately depict what you see on the screen and be able to see that on your phone. And that's the only reason I don't like pictures on it. Once I have them, I can go back, I can send myself an email with a PDF, and I can leave it with the system, so somebody coming in after me will have pictures to use in troubleshoot. Right? So now it's up to you guys. Come up here. I'll show you the knobology a little bit, and then I'm gonna let you play. If you have questions, I'll be right here. But really, it's on you. And I'm worried because I only get half an image here. But that needs change when I get water in the pan, which I'm getting right